It's time for the Ghoulie Girls.
A rectory that became home to 3 families of the parish, all of which have reported paranormal phenomena. Tales of a ghost nun, headless coachman, mysterious scribbles appearing on the walls would go on to become local legend. It has fascinated spiritualists, psychic researchers, and skeptics alike, and went on to become an obsession for one man seeking conclusive evidence. The Borley Rectory is located in Borley, Essex, England, and is known as the most haunted house in England. Sightings and reports of paranormal activity at Borley Rectory first emerged in 1863 when the rectory was constructed and appointed to Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Bull, who just a year before was named rector of the parish. The house was built over part of where the original rectory stood, which dated back between 1550 and 1600. Reverend Bull, his wife, as well as their 8 children at the time, moved into the rectory and build a life there. They would expand on the house as their family expanded to 14 children. Henry Bull passed away in 1892 and left the property to his son Harry and his family. One night, when 4 of Harry Bull's daughters were out in the fields, they came across a ghost nun. For whatever reason, the curious girls attempted to approach the nun, but as they got closer, the ghostly figure vanished into thin air. Another strange occurrence that was also witnessed by other locals was of a phantom coach driven by 2 headless horsemen. But it's the story of the ghost nun that haunts the grounds that becomes local legend. The legend goes that in life, the nun had a secret affair with a monk from a nearby Benedictine monastery. When the 2 lovers were caught by their superiors, they were severely punished for their sins and for disobeying their vows to God. The monk was immediately executed, and the nun suffered a slow and painful death when she was bricked up in a chamber and was left to die. Borley Rectory became vacant after the death of Harry Bull on June 9, 1927. After a year of vacancy, the Borley Rectory would become home to Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his wife. Soon after the Smiths moved into the rectory, Mrs. Smith discovered the skull of a young woman that was stored in a brown paper package while she was cleaning out the cupboard. After the discovery of the young woman's skull, the Smiths began to notice other unexplainable incidents, including phantom footsteps, lights at their windows, and servant bells ringing, even though they were disconnected. And like the Bell family before them, Mrs. Smith too saw a horse-driven carriage going across a field late at night. Out of desperation, the Smiths contacted the Daily Mirror in hopes of getting connected with the SPR, Society of Psychical Research. The newspaper arranged for one of their reporters to do an expose on the mysteries of Borley. They also arranged for renowned paranormal researcher Harry Price to make a visit to the rectory and investigate the paranormal phenomena that the Smiths were experiencing. Harry Price was an esteemed member of the SBR since 1920 for his work in exposing fraudulent spiritualist mediums. He was also an accomplished conjurer. His expertise was his sleight-of-hand magic tricks that earned him his membership in the Magic Circle. Harry Price stayed at the house for only a couple of days for his investigation. Upon his arrival, the paranormal activity at Borley intensified. Objects such as vases and stones were being thrown around the place by unseen hands, and there were also tappings of spiritual messages coming from the frames of the mirror. However, these strange occurrences seemed to cease after Price's departure. He didn't return to the rectory while the Smiths were residents. 2 professional mediums were then sent from London to perform a seance. The seance was held for hours without any luck in contacting any spirits that were believed to haunt the house. The Smiths decided to leave behind the nightmare of Borley on July 14, 1929, just a little over 2 years after they moved in. The next family to move in were the Foysters, Reverend Lionel Algernon Foyster, his wife Mary Ann, and their adopted daughter Adelaide. Lionel was first cousins of the Bull family. They moved into the rectory on October 16, 1930. Lionel and Mary Ann had been married for 8 years. Mary Ann was 22 years his junior. She was 23, and Lionel was 45 when they married in August 1922. They owned a flower shop in Wimbledon, which was run by Mary Ann and her assistant, Frank Peerless, who dodged at the rectory during their time there. It wasn't long before they endured similar experiences as the families before them. Lionel Forster wrote to Harry Price about the strange things that were happening to them since they arrived, such as bells ringing, stones and bottles flying across the room, their daughter Adelaide being locked into a room without a key, and being physically attacked by, quote, something horrible. Strangely, a lot of the events that the Foisters would face would be centered around the wife Marianne, who started to get lesions that were caused by a violent poltergeist that would throw household objects at her and physically push her off of the bed. But what truly frightened the family was the unexplained writings on the wall, which if you look close enough read, please for help and prayers. And also, Marianne, please help me get out. On a couple of occasions, Lionel Foister attempted to conduct some exorcisms to rid the house of the evil that it plagued. These attempts proved to be unsuccessful though. While in the middle of one of the exorcism prayers, Lionel was hit on the shoulder by a rock the size of a fist. By this time, the Mysteries of Borley had become well known for its supernatural activity due to the articles published by the Daily Mirror. The news of the latest paranormal events at the Borley attracted the attention of many psychic researchers who were eager to get their hands on some tangible evidence. Professional medium Kyle Strange reported that on his visit to the rectory, he encountered mysterious forms of men and women all about the house. Lights being on in unoccupied rooms, fires being lit, articles being thrown, and bizarre whispers. He even asserted that the Reverend told him a story about how he was working at his desk in his office and he saw a pencil levitate on its own and began to scribble on the wall. But a shared opinion amongst many of the investigators is that these events were manipulated by Marianne, whether she had done it consciously or subconsciously. At first, Marianne Foister denied these claims and said that she suspected her husband Lionel caused these events. In October 1935, the Foisters left Borley due to Lionel's ill health. After a couple of years of vacancy, Harry Price took out a year-long rental agreement to make it possible for him to stay at the rectory. He, along with 48 assistants that he recruited, were assigned to report any phenomena that they encountered during their stay at Borley. Some of the otherworldly episodes that Price and his colleagues had experienced were peculiar sounds of footsteps, levitating objects, and coats of disembodied spirits gliding through the house. Helen Glanville, who was a daughter of one of Price's assistants, S.J. Glanville, made contact with two spirits while conducting a planchette seance, which is basically an early form of Ouija. The first spirit she communicated with identified herself to be a young French nun by the name of Marie Léry. She went on to say that she left her religious order and moved to England to marry a member of the Welgrave family who owned the land before the Borley was built in the 17th century. The spirit went on to explain that she had been murdered by her betrothed and buried in the cellar of an older building on the premises, or had been disposed into an unused well, and that it was her who wrote that message on the wall to Marianne. The second spirit that Glanville conducted identified himself as Sunix Amaris. He said that he would set fire to the rectory that very night and would reveal the bones of a murdered person. This message would prove to be a foreshadowing when the rectory got a new owner in 1939, a man named Captain W.H. Gregson, who purchased the house in hopes of converting it into a tourist attraction for profit. But on February 22, 1939, while Gregson was unpacking some boxes, he accidentally knocked over an oil lamp that set blaze to the rectory, burning it to a crisp. Although Gregson reported the fire to be an accident, the insurance company concluded that the fire was set deliberately. While interviews were conducted with neighbors who witnessed the fire, some claimed to have seen the ghostly figure of a nun peering down from the upper window as the fire began to spread rapidly. A few years passed by, and in 1943, Harry Price was still obsessed with Borley and arranged for a dig in the cellars of the ruined house to take place. He, along with W.H. Gregson, who was still determined to turn a profit, stood witness while the dig was being conducted. Others who were present included a reverend and a pathologist named Dr. Eric Bailey. However, the physical labor of the dig was performed by the reverend's gardener, Jackson. Within only a few hours, the men conveniently discovered two bones, which were determined to be the remains of the young nun, Marie Léry. Price insisted that the remains he discovered be given a proper Christian burial in order for the soul of the deceased woman to be at peace. However, the parish refused his request due to the widespread speculation that the remains were merely bones of a pig. A year later, in 1944, the rectory was demolished with Harry Price present, as well as an assistant and photographer. This was Price's last chance of gathering substantial evidence of the haunts of Borley, which he intended to publish to Life magazine. He did manage to find one of the photos that was taken on site to be of a brick that was levitating midair. This, of course, was immediately dismissed as just a brick that was falling. Once a respected member of the SVR, Harry Price's reputation was ruined after his involvement with the Borley Rectory. He died in 1948 from a heart attack. After his death, Charles Sutton of the Daily Mirror accused Price of faking the phenomena at Borley. Sutton said that on a visit to the rectory for a story, he had been hit on the head with a large pebble. He knew it to be a ruse and challenged Price by confiscating his coat and found a pocket full of different sized pebbles. A couple of Price's closest colleagues, who were eyewitnesses during Price's tenancy at Borley, published a book in 1956 titled The Haunting of Borley Rectory, which disclosed the hauntings of the house as well as Price's reports to be a hoax. Even the people who had previously lived at the rectory would later admit that the hauntings were indeed fake, and the legends associated with the house had all been made up. Mrs. Smith admitted that she always suspected Price of using his conjuring tricks to falsify the phenomena to advance his career. Two staff members for the Smiths, Mary Pearson and Fred Tatum, reported to Mrs. Smith that during a luncheon, a salt shaker was shot across the table, which Price explained to be a ghost, but Mary said that she distinctly saw Price throwing the condiment himself. The children of Reverend Bull, the first family to live at the rectory, would later say they had never seen any ghosts, and they were surprised that the rectory had garnered the name of being the most haunted house in England. And the legend that surrounded the ghost nun has since then proven to have no historical basis to support it. The most damning and definitely the most amusing of these confessions comes from Mary Ann Foister, who admitted that the lesions she originally claimed to be from a poltergeist pushing her out of bed were actually caused by a torrid affair she was having with Frank Peerless, the man who helped her run her flower shop and who lodged at the rectory while they lived there. She used a supposed supernatural activity to explain things away and conceal the affair. She also admitted that she would play practical jokes on her husband to spook him, and even on occasion would invite her friends over to join in on the fun. The house was left a ruin and never rebuilt. In 1976, famed husband and wife team Ed and Lorraine Warren, who were renowned demonologists and experts in paranormal phenomena, visited the grounds of what used to be Borley Rectory, in which Lorraine claimed to have visions of the fabled ghost nun. But that's not to say that all of the hauntings at Borley were staged. There are many other accounts from various people who lived within the vicinity of the rectory who claim to have seen ghostly apparitions among the fields. These people would have nothing to gain in embellishing any stories of ghostly encounters. So what do you think? Is Borley Rectory truly haunted? Now it's time for the girls to have a ghoulie discussion.
Let's talk about scary things.
So do you guys think that Borley Rectory is haunted?
I'm a bit skeptical.
I believe in all of that stuff. I'm not someone who ever likes to try to debunk anything. But when you hear a story like this,
Yeah.
and then there's doubt in your mind, it's just like, yeah, that doesn't really sound, even though there's some consistencies.
Obviously, some people are obviously lying about it, you know?
So I like a good ghost story, but this one just isn't something that I find believable.
It's something that kept getting more and more exaggerated. There's there are consistencies, but then with exaggerations it becomes inconsistent.
Yeah.
It's not
It's just hard to pinpoint what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
I'm 50-50 on some of the stories.
Yeah, I was ready to believe it, and along the way there just turned out to be a lot of hoaxes that kind of just makes it altogether hard to believe.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like even when I first narrated the story, I was pretty much all in. Mm-hmm. And when we were listening to it, I was like, okay, there's some consistencies, and I wrote down notes of the consistencies. And then as I really started to think about it and we started talking about it, I saw it more as a hoax. There's a few consistencies that maybe the legend was built. All of the things that came after, I just feel like are very much a hoax.
because with each family, things started getting more and more embellished.
At first I was believing it, but then it's just like, oh, so then they exaggerated this, they exaggerated that. You can't help but wonder what's true and what's not anymore because they started to exaggerate so much.
Yeah.
Pretty much when they brought Mr. Smith in.
Harry Price.
Harry Price. Why do I keep calling him Smith?
I don't know,
but
like Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
But Harry Price.
Harry Price. When they brought him in,
That was a game changer.
yeah, I feel like that's where it really became elevated with the feeling of it being a hoax.
Yeah.
It was
And-
ridiculous after a while with him.
Yeah. And then you can really see, I mean, I'm a believer, but when you start to hear stories like this, then it's like, okay, this feels more like a hoax than the truth.
Yeah.
I'm not someone who likes to debunk ghost stories
Yeah.
at all.
No.
I'm pretty much like, wow, that was really interesting, and I believe that could totally happen. But with this, I really just don't feel like it's authentic.
Yeah.
And there's some things that were very convenient
Yeah.
that just kind of like, oh, wow, and like the affair,
Yeah.
that was pretty funny that she, like, when you're hearing the story, you're like, wow, I mean, these lesions just appeared on her body and she's being pushed out of her bed. It's just like, wow, that's got to be pretty traumatizing for something like that to happen.
Yeah.
And then later on, she admits that the affair, the lesions were actually marks that were left on her body from the affair that she had with the man that worked in her flower shop. And she just used what was going on in the house as a cover-up for her affair.
Yep.
And just really embellished it. I mean, that's quite an embellishment to cover up an affair.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty honest, too. I honestly am proud that she was able to tell the truth about that. At least she admitted it.
And she didn't have to admit
Yeah, she
it.
didn't.
But it just makes you wonder why she admitted it,
Well, also, how about the daughter getting locked up in her room? So did she go that far to lock up the daughter in the room and
Yeah.
blame it on the ghost?
Yeah, I think that was like the most entertaining part of the
Yeah.
story.
That part made me laugh so much.
That's the part that stands out the most to me about the whole story.
Yeah.
Is the affair, and then that's when I hear that part of the story. That's when I'm just like, this whole thing is a hoax.
Yeah.
And that's when it kind of started to unravel.
Oh, same for me. I was just like, I don't believe any of this.
Yeah, the girls, the ones that initially saw the nun, they were the ones that initially saw the headless coachman too.
Yeah.
But then also Mrs. Smith said that she saw the headless coachman.
Yeah.
And I
I
think-
believe everything she says.
Yeah, she seems one of the more trustworthy ones. She also found that human skull. It just makes you wonder how long it had been there before she discovered it. Like, how did the other families not discover it?
Yeah, how long was it there?
It's interesting how the legend built, and that basically it got a lot of attention because of those articles. But once there's attention, then they got to keep making the news big. Price, he became obsessed, and it's like at first I was like, well, there has to be something to it for him to be so obsessed. But really, it was just because it had already got so much attention. He was just still trying to feed on that attention.
Yeah, milking it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are several people who witnessed him faking the activity around.
Yeah. And I'm sure there was probably
Way
more
more.
witnesses as well,
Yeah.
and they just let it get out of hand. But I think there's definitely some truth to it because the legend came from somewhere. You just kind of have to decide what you believe and what you don't believe. And that's why we asked the question, well, do you think it's a hoax? I think most of it is, but there's definitely some truth to it.
Yeah.
I think more so the basic things. I like to believe about the headless coachman because I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
But
I actually believe that one, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna give them that one.
Maybe the ghost nun, but then that one, they just kept exaggerating and changing the story.
I don't know if I believe the ghost nun. The more I hear, it's just like, thought she was a nun. Now she's this person. Like,
But-
the story.
But
just
that's because of
changed.
Harry Price,
Yeah.
changing it up.
yeah,
And
and that's what I was thinking was the ghost nun could very much be real. It's just they added to her story and gave her this name and said
That's
that she
true.
was, buried here, and then they found the bones that was really, possibly of a pig.
the Warrens, her supposedly having visions of the ghost nun. Yeah, I did read that that was like a place that they visited on their wedding anniversary every year.
Oh,
so I don't know how true that is, but that's kind of
weird.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they also have a reputation of being kind of sketchy too. So who knows how much truth there is to that? You know, them just kind of jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, that too, to help their reputation as well. There's a lot to the story, whether it's true or a hoax. It's just kind of a lot to follow.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting story, whether it's true or not. I mean, it's definitely one you can't help but just be like, are they telling the truth or not?
I think I
More like-
believe 20% of
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, I'm like
75.
2080, like Jackie. I don't believe most
Yeah,
of it.
I don't.
And for it to be known as the most haunted place in England, with it being such a hoax type of
Background.
reputation attached to it, especially with the lies that were uncovered. It's like, well, is it really the most haunted place in England? I don't think you can say that it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of other places that are more haunted than the Borley Rectory. So
Just got that tagline, basically.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss out on any of our latest Ghoulie Tales.